You might be a lot like me where it's the middle of the year, you already have started your fourth journal, and at the top of it, you write, "This is it. This is the start. I'm really doing it this time." When you might have started more times this year than most people have attempted in 5, yet somehow you're still at the day 1. And not only that, but if you went back to some journals or some goals that you set yourself years ago, you might notice that you're still setting the same goals and you're still trying to fix the same thing today. So in this video, I will talk about why you can read all the books, do all the journaling, do all the planning, and still be stuck fixing the same thing that you were trying to fix 5 years ago. Because there's a reason why none of it has actually worked. And once I show you what it actually is, you will see it everywhere. If you're new here, my name is Austra. I'm a mindset and resilience coach with background in sports psychology, and I have been in this space for over a decade. First, as somebody who consumed everything to fix myself, and now as somebody who's helping others to bridge that gap. So let's get into it. When I was around 12, 13 years old, I started to wake up at 5 a.m. To do my own workouts in the morning. And it wasn't because of a 5 a.m. club. I was not aware of it back then. It wasn't because I watched all these videos on the best morning routine or anything like that. It actually came from me feeling insecure and feeling like I'm not good enough in basketball. So the only thing that I could think of is to go and do my own workouts. And I was doing them at 5 a.m. mainly because there was nobody outside. I was so insecure about the way I would run and the way I would look that was the only time that I felt like I'm a bit safer to to be doing my workouts because nobody can see me because nobody was up. And really the only thing that I could think of back then was to just do more and train extra. And that really was my belief that, like, if I want to get better, I need to do more. I need to do extra. So that's what I would do for years. I would wake up at 5 a.m. every single day. I would do my workouts, which led me to become the only player that was able to play without any rest. And I didn't even look at the bench. But that was the result of those initial actions. Then a couple of years later, I discovered self-development and I was immersed in it. I was reading the books, I was watching the videos, I was doing all the journaling. There was a point where I actually had my pocketbook, or like Kindle, replace my phone, where I would literally be walking around and I'll be reading books. I think there was that year I read over 70 books. I would just be reading, observing, learning all the time. And I genuinely thought I was getting better, but what actually happened was that I was getting smarter on paper, but not necessarily in real life. What I was doing instead is what I call feel-good productivity. That's where you do what feels good in the moment and might give you some sense of perceived progress, but that's not actually moving you towards the thing, or that's not the actual action that will help you to progress in what you actually want to progress in. Like, for example, I would be making gym programs instead of just going and doing the program. Or I would watch a course on how to start a business instead of starting a business. And I would have these deep dives into trying to understand the shame, body shame, and all those kind of guilt, people pleasing, instead of just learning to say no or doing something that triggered shame. And the tricky part here is that as long as I kept learning, I kind of felt like, oh, there's some progress, and it takes a very long, or like it took me a very long time to actually realize that this is not working. And I think partly it was because of how much I was learning. In some ways, it was distraction from how big is the gap between me and where I want to be, or it allowed me not to address the actual work necessary to start to actually bridge that gap. It would be kind of like I'm chasing this sense of like feeling ready to take the first step and just hoping that the right answer that I need to take this first step is right around the corner, right in the next book, in the next video. It will be there. That's the key to me actually starting to take the first step. Now I feel ready. But that's not the way it works. The content was giving me a sense of progress without me having to face the actual discomfort that it took to grow and get better. It's kind of like what I was doing was packing a suitcase and organizing everything and making sure that I got all the things that I need to get so that I can go on my trip. without ever having even booked a flight. And I would get ready to leave and go on the trip, but there's no trip that has been booked. And all that really has happened is that I have packed this suitcase better, but I'm still in the same room that I started packing it in. It's just better packed. And it's the same with your self-work. You organize things better in your mind. You might understand things better. You might understand them deeper. You might get more clear on certain patterns, behaviors, and insights about yourself. But you haven't actually changed anything. You're just in the same space, in the same four walls, as in like with the suitcase example, where nothing really has changed. And here's what makes it hard. Consuming content and learning all the self-development and getting all this information, it actually feels good. And the information actually might be good. It might be very beneficial. It might be helpful once applied. But a lot of times where we stop is that we consume, we feel better about the idea of improving, but we never actually take the steps needed. So that's where it's important to remember that feelings aren't results. So consuming content might feel like progress, but it's not the actual progress. You're just circling around taking the action. And it's also in some ways a good way to feed your ego because you're not necessarily being lazy. You are consuming this content. You have intention to work on yourself, but in reality, you're just distracting yourself. You're procrastinating on actually starting to take the action, and you're staying in comfort zone that looks like ambition. But the fact that you're still in the same space, still working on the same problem, that should be a reason for you to stop and be like, hold on, something is not working. I need to look into this. Maybe I need to change my approach. Assuming you do want to get that result, you do want to get that improvement and resolve whatever is the issue or challenge that you want to resolve. Now, I want to go a bit deeper in the layer that I kind of touched on already, where one is that you consume so much content that you kind of get this sense of progress or this feeling of insight, but you don't do something. But the other layer is that you might actually be consuming the content and you might actually be taking the action. You might wake up at 5 a.m., do the cold plunges, take the supplements in the right order, check off all the boxes of all the things that you have set for yourself to do in the day. And then you have breakdown at 10 a.m. because of the insane list that you have set for yourself, which, by the way, I'm very familiar with because I went through a phase when I did all my habit tracking and everything, and I got to 33 things that I did every single day that I checked off for a couple of months. And what happened there was that self-improvement became less about living better and more about performing better. It's kind of like I had stepped into this over-optimization mode where and it comes also a lot with being driven, ambitious, you want to improve, you also are aware. And the more you work on yourself, the more aware you become of the things that you can and could work on. So there's like much more layers that you unravel as you go, but you can get to the point where now every single day, every single moment is optimized for growth, development, and moving forward to the point where you're not really living anymore. You're just performing and you get too stuck in all the things that you have to get done, all the things that you have to improve, all the things that you have to fix in yourself. And then on top of it, even though you are doing more, you might actually be feeling worse because you focus on the few things that you didn't do out of the list of endless amount of tasks that you set for yourself, where you might actually be getting more things done than the version of you that didn't have those tasks. But now you might focus on the couple of tasks that you didn't finish in that day. And that can make you feel worse or that you're failing. And it can actually start feeding more of negativity than positives about you taking these steps and these actions. It's kind of like this, it becomes this like self-fulfilling like prophecy for you to beat yourself up for your own shortcomings and mistakes rather than celebrating the insane progress and growth that you're going through, which also really depends, because doing more isn't always better. It's about doing the right things, and also doing them in a way where you can sustain them. But that's another topic. I think the other thing that comes with this is that when you're somebody who sees yourself as not disciplined, you can become so over focused, even consumed with building this identity of being the disciplined person, to the moment where you start to kind of lose your sight of like reality and what actually matters. So it's kind of like I would do more of the busy productivity instead of efficient, effective productivity. And in some ways, I would find comfort in being disciplined and continuing the tasks that I needed to do, because then it would feel that identity of being productive person. Whereas if I would fall short, then I'm like, oh shoot, like I'm not being this person that I have to, and I would kind of go down the rabbit hole of beating myself up, seeing myself as lazy, and all those things. Even though I would still be doing a lot of things, I did not see the upside. I was focused more on my like shortcomings and things that I didn't do. And it wasn't just about me, because I was also focused on how others were perceiving me, and I really cared about what others thought of me. So now every shortcoming, every mistake that I made, it would be filled with shame or guilt and fear of how I'm going to be perceived, or fear of being perceived the wrong way, or not the way I would want to be seen. And it's kind of like this very messy place to be, where it actually doesn't become as helpful or as growth orientated as it is trying to manage your own self perception through the perception of others and kind of the image that you want to create, where it ends up not actually being about, am I disciplined, am I productive or not? It started to be more about, how am I perceived? And then there would be people where they don't really care about any of those things, and they just go and do the thing and they live their life. And that's where it's similar to what I talk about confidence, where confident people don't walk around saying that they're confident. They're just being confident. And it's the same with discipline. Disciplined people don't walk around trying to prove to people, and sometimes even to themselves, that they're disciplined. They just go and do the thing. They just are disciplined. So it's kind of like with this sense of lack or some kind of inefficiencies that I might be identifying in myself, I was trying to build up this identity of, I am disciplined, I am this, I am that, instead of just being that. It's like I was focused on proving it instead of being it. And with all those things, what I ended up doing is I created this kind of belief that for me to be more disciplined, I had to have more structure, to the point where now it became like a prison. So if there was some time that I would have some free time, or I would go somewhere, I would feel very guilty for not being productive, not doing the work, or not doing my habits, or working on certain things, or learning, or improving. I would just feel bad about it. And it got to the point where my life pretty much became like a to-do list. And finishing that to-do list would determine the way I would feel about myself. And it took me a while to learn that missing one workout doesn't make me a failure. Skipping one cold shower doesn't mean that I will never succeed. Nor do any of those actions not getting done one of the days determines my worth or how I perceive myself. Because what matters is whether you are moving, not if you are performing the movement. So instead of punishing yourself every time when you don't do one of the things, focus on consistency and making sure that that one failure doesn't mean that you're now going to quit or beat yourself up, because that also doesn't help. And also be mindful not to add any meaning to it. So if you fail, there might be a lesson. It might be that you're trying to do too much. It might be that this is actually not relevant. It might be that there was something that happened that day. Whatever was the reason, instead of now beating yourself up and making yourself feel like a failure and quitting the whole thing, try to learn the lesson, analyze, and adjust accordingly. Otherwise, it just becomes this start, stop, beat myself up, fail again. And just like you just go in loops with this, where it's not going to lead you anywhere. And then you will wake up in another 5 years with having still the same goal, because you never actually kept going. You just started and stopped the whole past 5 years, which it's exhausting. It's exhausting to keep starting and stopping instead of just, okay, I made a mistake, I own it, and I move on, and I just take the lesson with me. So we have gone from taking no action to taking the wrong action. So now let's talk about taking the right action. And a lot of times, what is underneath taking the real action that you actually need to take is fear. Fear of not being good enough or not being as good at the beginning, which, by the way, you will not be great at something that you do for the first time. It might be the sense of like failing or failing in front of others or the way you might be seen. It might, and this was something that I had, is it might be the fear of what if I give my best and I still fail? So in my case, I didn't want to face that, or I didn't necessarily want to answer that question, so I just wouldn't do the thing. And this is where the real growth happens. As you start to take these actions of something that you know you need to do, something that you might have identified, even if with some content that you might consume, you learn that, oh, for me to get better at this, I need to do this. Let's say with people pleasing. You can understand inside out all you want, but at some point you need to start learning to say no. Not even learning, you need to start saying no. And that's where the real growth happens. It's messy. It's very uncomfortable. You have all these negative emotions come up. You just don't want to do it. You overthink the whole time. That's the actual growth. Like, welcome to growth. Welcome to being human and evolving. And that's really where you learn the most. And that's why I think a lot of us, we stay stuck in our minds and in our plans and aspirations because it doesn't feel good. We can't predict it. For the most part, it's very uncomfortable. It might even be triggering to the point, it might even be embarrassing. It might cause a lot of shame, or there's a lot of shame you need to face and overcome, or guilt, or whatever emotion, where it's not as pretty as watching a movie in your head about where you want to be. Like the actual journey, it's like there's a lot of obstacles, there's a lot of mud, there's a lot of mess that you need to go through. And I think that's partly why once we start to take the first steps, a lot of times if we end up taking them, we kind of like take the step back or retract because it's just not what we thought it gonna be, or it doesn't feel good. But it's okay to feel those emotions. They will come up. That's literally like that's the sign that you are now out of your comfort zone. You're now expanding it. And the more of those actions you take and experiences you have, the more you can actually expand that comfort zone to the point where what once was uncomfortable now is your new normal. There is one thing for you to be mindful about, though, both with the feel good productivity and also the actual kind of growth steps that you take, where especially overachievers, you can literally get to the point where you now overdo it and you crash and burn and nothing is working and your nervous system is like shut down. And then a lot of times what I see is that people go the opposite extreme, where I will not set any goals, I will not have any plans, I'm just gonna kind of like do whatever. Either that, or they also start to look at themselves as I'm the problem, I'm the weak link, disregarding the human biology. And I have done this before. And neither of extremes is actually the right answer. And I think in general, the way we look at self-development needs to be changed, because I think it's about making your life better. It's not about making your life busier or more stressed or more optimized. And optimized not for well-being or happiness or fulfillment or growth, but for performance and perception and fitting in whatever it is that you want your image or status to be. I think it's also important to keep in mind that real growth, self-development, improvement, it isn't these spikes of motivation and then you crash and burn and you overdo it or all these things, or you feel great and or like you have to overcome and face and push. Like some of it can be part of it at some moments, but actually it is pretty boring. It is pretty boring process because you have to do the pretty much the same thing over and over again. and you have to do it enough times where now it becomes like a skills, or there's like enough improvement where you start to see some like upside from the work that you have put in. And a lot of times it can feel like you're doing a lot of work for like very long time with no results, but that's really you planting the seeds. Like the progress is happening and that the foundation is being built, you just don't see it yet. And I think that this is where the marketing of self development is a bit wrong, where we see all these movies, all these like inspiration, motivation, all this music and like like early mornings and all that, where in reality, self development, self growth looks like just like another Tuesday where you do the thing that you have to do, where you might not necessarily do like feel great to do it because you're doing it for the hundredth of time. And it's just yet another time that you have to show up and you have to put in the work. But that's the real growth. That's where the real growth actually happens. And that's why I think a lot of times you don't see the growth because it starts to get boring and you go and chase the next thing, or you jump into this next like exciting thing, or you think that something is wrong with just doing this, not necessarily doing always just the same thing, but just focused on that consistency, because at the beginning it's exciting, but then at some point it really does get very boring. But that's where you actually break through, because patience is a big one. And the more patient you can stay and the more you can trust that process and just keep showing up every day like it's the first, soon enough you will see result. It's just a matter of time. It's just that time hasn't caught up yet. You just need to put enough of those reps in and you will see the result. You just need to actually show up and trust the process. And be mindful that it will not be perfect every single day. Like, we are humans and you will make mistakes. You will have some shortcomings, and that's okay as long as that shortcoming is not a reason for you to quit and you show up the next day again. All this to say, self-development can be a great tool. It just depends how you approach it. If you use it as something that you just scroll, learn, consume, and just try to look for the answers or try to come up with the plans, you might as well just go and watch a movie and, and enjoy your time. Otherwise, you might just feel worse for not progressing or improving yourself. But if instead let's say you have this one specific thing you want to work on, and you go and find like one specific thing that you can actually do or put in place, and you go and actually do it, you will start to see results, and it actually can be a great resource for you to grow and get better. I know that for me, since I stopped just consuming self-growth, self-development stuff, whether it's books, workshops, events, videos, and I started to apply more, I actually am the amount that I consume is much less, but the results are much bigger because I actually go and do. So I read something, I see one action that I can take, I go and actually take it instead of like, oh, let me just write it down. I will get to it. I need to first map out my plan before I take the action, and I never actually get to taking the action because I don't feel ready. So I have seen much more growth just because of that implementation and less of the amount of consumption that I'm like having. And that has led me to some great experiences. When I moved to UK, I was actually on the plane for the first time. I have never lived by myself. I have never been living in a new country. And I just went for it. The same thing was with Half Ironman. I just signed up for it, 90 days to go, where the only thing that I had done from Half Ironman was to finish half marathon, which I barely did. And I have never been on a road bike. With the open water swims, I literally did my first open water swim the week before the race, and I still managed to finish it because I took the first step and I actually took the action instead of thinking about it. If I was thinking about it, I would postpone it another year, and then the next year something would come up and I wouldn't do it, and I probably still wouldn't have done it because I just didn't feel ready. But instead, what I did is I committed before I was ready. So now I have commitment, I have signed up, I need to figure it out. And that's something that has been very, very helpful for me in my life, is just identify something that you want to work on, commit before you're ready, and go figure it out.